What if I told you that one of the most powerful moves you'll ever make is the one where you do absolutely nothing? Not out of spite, not out of bitterness, but because silence, when delivered from a place of self-respect, becomes the sharpest clarity you'll ever offer someone who took you for granted. Let's be honest, you've probably been told that texting again, reaching out, being the bigger person, is the mature thing to do. Right. That silence is childish. That letting go is weakness. That not responding is some form of emotional immaturity. But what if that's completely wrong? What if all of that advice is based on a deep misunderstanding of your power? Let's flip this narrative on its head. Because today, I'm going to show you that your silence is not just powerful, it's transformative. Not for them, but for you. Have you ever wondered why they stopped replying even though your words were full of patience, kindness, and vulnerability? Why your thoughtful messages were met with coldness, delays, or just dead air? You weren't crazy. You weren't needy. You were simply dealing with someone who mistook your consistency for weakness. And that, my friends, is where everything begins to shift. Because once you realize you were feeding someone who had no intention of appreciating your presence, your silence becomes sacred. This video is going to change something in you. Not because I'm asking you to play a game, but because I'm inviting you to embrace a higher standard. A standard rooted in stoicism, clarity, and peace. You don't have to beg. You don't have to chase. You don't have to perform CPR on a relationship that flatlined months ago. What if you've been asking the wrong question all along? Not, how do I fix this? But, why am I the only one trying? And more importantly, what happens when I finally stop? We're going to walk through 6 undeniable truths. 6 cold, clear, stoic reflections that will not only validate your experience, but completely rewire how you move forward. You're not watching this video to get a few cute quotes and move on. You're here because something in your soul is tired. Tired of emotional games. Tired of waiting. Tired of being the one who texts first, hopes first, breaks first. But not anymore. In a few minutes, you're going to feel something you haven't felt in a long time. Peace. And by the end, you'll know exactly why. Never text them again isn't just a line. It's a promise to yourself. A boundary that rebuilds your strength. A vow rooted in stoicism and self-respect. So don't go anywhere. Because the deeper we go, the clearer it gets. And in the last part, we'll unpack something so raw, so honest, it'll hit like a realization you can't unfeel. And when it does, you won't want to text them ever again, not because you're angry, but because you've finally remembered who the hell you are. 1. Your silence is not punishment, it's power. Silence has a way of unsettling those who are used to your noise. Not noise in the literal sense, but the emotional weight of your presence, your messages, your check-ins, your willingness to always reach out first. And the moment that noise stops, something subtle but powerful begins to unfold. Have you noticed how quickly they respond to your silence, not with words, but with confusion, anxiety, and quiet desperation? That's not coincidence. That's recognition. They may not admit it, but they feel it deeply. Something has shifted. And that something is you. You see, people often confuse communication with connection. Just because someone texts you doesn't mean they care, and just because someone goes quiet doesn't mean they don't. But what matters is why that silence exists. In Stoic relationships, silence is not a retreat. It is an assertion. When you go quiet, you are not punishing anyone. You are declaring, "This is my boundary. This is where I reclaim my peace." It's not revenge. It's restraint. It's not manipulation, it's mastery. So many people fear silence because they fear what it reflects. It forces them to confront the absence of value, the absence of care, the absence of effort. And for someone who fed off your energy without ever returning it, your silence is like oxygen being cut from a room. That's the essence of Stoicism, not reacting out of emotional urgency, but responding with deliberate discipline. You're not avoiding confrontation. You're transcending it. Ask yourself this: How many times did you text out of anxiety rather than intention? How often did you break your own boundaries just to feel seen for a moment? And what did that ever bring you? A dry response? A read receipt with no follow-up? These aren't signs of mutual connection. They're signs that you've been investing in an emotional void. The first act of self-respect is to stop filling a space where you're no longer being received. There's a beautiful paradox in silence. It's often mistaken for weakness by those who don't understand it. But to remain still in a world that pushes you to constantly react, explain, and justify, that takes real strength. Silence, when rooted in self-awareness, becomes your shield. And while they may believe you're being cold or distant, the truth is you're simply conserving your energy for something worthy. Not someone who mistook your vulnerability for availability. Let's be brutally honest, your silence is not meant to hurt them. It's meant to heal you. It's the detox from a cycle that drained you. It's a break in the pattern that once defined your days. And as you embrace that quiet, something begins to rise inside you, a sense of clarity. You start to see things for what they are, not what you hoped they could be. And that's the moment you stop chasing and start choosing. Imagine for a second that silence was a mirror. Not just for them, but for you. What would it show? That you were always the one trying, the one overextending, the one minimizing your needs just to keep the connection alive? Your silence now reflects your growth. It no longer serves their ego. It serves your soul. And in Stoic relationships, that reflection is sacred. It's the space where your integrity meets your dignity. Have you ever noticed how your absence is louder than your presence used to be? That's because when someone gets used to you filling all the emotional gaps, they never prepare for the day you walk away. They never believe you'll stay quiet. They believe you'll always explain, always text, always ask. But when you don't, when you finally break that rhythm, their reality fractures. That's not cruelty. That's consequence. There's no strength in constant availability. In fact, there's nothing stoic about chasing someone who can't meet you in the middle. The discipline to remain silent is often more courageous than any dramatic confrontation. Why? Because silence requires endurance. It requires you to sit with your emotions rather than offloading them onto someone who never held space for them in the first place. You're not ghosting them. You're ghosting the version of yourself that tolerated disrespect. You're laying that identity to rest, the one that begged, chased, and sacrificed peace for temporary attention. That version was fueled by hope, yes, but also by fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of being forgotten. But silence teaches you that solitude is not emptiness. It's a return to self. Let me ask you something direct. When you were texting them, how did you feel right after pressing send? Empowered? Or anxious? Did it feel like an offering of connection, or a plea for validation? The truth is, when love is not mutual, communication becomes a performance. You start crafting your words for reaction, not expression. But when you choose silence, you reclaim the narrative. You no longer wait for them to define your worth through their responses. They may not say it, but they notice. Every day your name doesn't light up their phone, they feel it. Every moment you remain quiet, they remember who used to speak with love. And whether they admit it or not, your silence confronts them with the one thing they tried to ignore. Your absence was always their doing, not yours. And that confrontation is brutal. That's the discipline of Stoicism, letting the weight of your absence teach the lessons your presence could not. Sometimes we think texting again will fix something. That it'll bring closure, or clarity, or maybe just ease the ache of missing them. But what if I told you that reaching out again would only reignite the illusion? That what you're trying to repair is not a relationship, but your own discomfort with silence? Lean into that discomfort. That's where the healing is. That's where the growth begins. Silence creates space. And in that space, truth surfaces. The truth of who they are. The truth of what you deserve. And the truth of why you stayed so long in a connection that didn't reciprocate. This is where Stoic relationships are formed, not in the exchange of constant messages, but in the quiet endurance of your own standard. You don't need to punish. You don't need to explain. You just need to remain grounded. And if you're worried that your silence will be misunderstood, remember this: clarity is not your responsibility when someone shows confusion. They had their chances to listen, to respond, to show up. They didn't. And now they get to live in the stillness they created. That's not punishment. That's life responding with balance. What happens next? That's where the beauty lies. Because when you choose silence with strength, it becomes a filter. The right people will respect it. The wrong ones will crumble beneath it. But either way, you win. You win because you stayed true to yourself. You win because you finally stopped giving your energy to people who only ever took it. Can you feel that shift? That rising sense that you no longer need to be the fixer, the pleaser, the emotional first responder? That's your power returning. And no, it doesn't come with applause. It comes with peace. And peace doesn't scream. It whispers, "You're finally free." The discipline of silence is the beginning of a new identity, one that no longer performs love but lives it with discernment. And as you walk forward, quieter but stronger, remember, your silence is not punishment. It's proof. Proof that you respect yourself too much to speak where you're not heard. Proof that your peace matters more than their confusion. Proof that stoicism isn't cold, it's clarity. They will notice. They will feel it. They will question it. But they will not control it anymore. Because you, my friend, have finally remembered that silence is not the absence of emotion. It's the presence of strength. And that presence? It's unshakable. 2. They didn't lose you because you stopped texting. They lost you because they took you for granted. It didn't happen when you hit block. It didn't happen the first time you chose not to reply. It didn't even happen when they left your last message unread. No, the moment they lost you was far earlier. It was the moment they decided your presence was permanent. That your love was unconditional without reciprocation. That you'd always be there, regardless of how little they showed up. And when they started believing that, they didn't just lose respect for the connection, they lost you. Not because you stopped texting, but because you finally realized your value. And Stoic relationships are not built on desperation. They're built on presence, on clarity, on mutual recognition. It's strange how silence, which once felt unbearable, now feels like relief. How something as small as not sending that text becomes the most powerful declaration of self-respect you've ever made. And that's the moment they realize something is different. Not in a dramatic, confrontational way, but in that quiet stillness that says, "I'm no longer available for emotional guessing games." That's when the illusion breaks. They didn't lose you because you became distant. They lost you because they mistook your consistency for weakness. They started thinking they could predict you. That no matter how many times they ignored your message, your heart would still reach out. That your forgiveness would always be waiting at the end of their silence. And so, they got comfortable. Not because they loved you, but because they loved being loved by you. There's a difference. And you felt that difference long before you had the words for it. That ache in your chest wasn't about rejection, it was about self-abandonment. Giving and giving, just to be acknowledged. What happens when someone thinks you'll never walk away? They stop trying. They stop appreciating. They start testing. It's human nature. We tend to take for granted what we think we'll never lose. And while Stoicism teaches us to remain calm under pressure, it also teaches us to withdraw from what no longer serves our growth. You became their comfort zone. But comfort without care becomes complacency. And that's exactly what happened. You sent texts that carried love. They replied with coldness. You checked in. They checked out. And yet you kept hoping. Hoping they'd wake up and see what they had. But the truth is, they didn't want to see it, not until it was gone. And now, in your silence, they're starting to feel the void you used to fill. But they don't feel guilt. They feel discomfort. Not because they miss you, but because they miss the way you made them feel. That's not love. That's convenience. This is the part that stings, right? The realization that you were never really seen for who you are. That your efforts were not only unnoticed, they were expected. They came to rely on your emotional labor like background noise. You made them feel better about themselves. You gave them a sense of importance. But they gave you breadcrumbs, if anything. And now, in your absence, they're finally realizing the love they once dismissed wasn't common. It was rare. Here's a question for you. How many times did you shrink so they could feel tall? How often did you silence your needs just to keep the peace? And in doing so, did they ever once meet you halfway? The answer doesn't require words. It's in your chest. You already know. That's why your silence is so potent now. Because it's not born from bitterness. It's born from awareness. There is a moment in every connection where the scales tip, where one person starts doing all the work. And in that moment, the dynamic changes. They stopped earning your attention. They just expected it. They stopped valuing your texts. They just assumed they'd come. And when they didn't, when the silence finally arrived, they were left with nothing but their own entitlement. That's when the truth hits. They didn't lose you. They gave you away. You were not the problem. You were not too much. You were too available for someone who was emotionally bankrupt. And when you took that availability back, they were left with their own emotional poverty. That's what they're sitting in now, not heartbreak, but exposure. They've been exposed to the truth. The connection was real, but they weren't. And now, they're face to face with a silence they never thought they'd have to endure. You gave them light. They mocked it. You offered warmth. They turned cold. You stayed open. They shut you out. And now, they want back the version of you that no longer exists. The one who waited. The one who overexplained. The one who believed potential was more important than proof. That version is gone. And it didn't die. It evolved. Why did they take you for granted? Because they believed you'd always come back. That no matter what, they still owned space in your heart. But Stoicism teaches us not to become emotionally enslaved to the validation of others. Your love is not a subscription service. It's a gift. One they used and abused until the supply ran out. Now they're realizing, belatedly, that what they threw away was irreplaceable. You ever notice how they only check in after you've gone silent? That's not love. That's ego. They don't miss you. They miss the control. They miss the validation. They miss being the one who got chased. But now, they're the ones staring at their phones. Waiting. Wondering. Not because they want to fix things, but because they can't handle being ignored the way they once ignored you. Let me ask you this. Why would you ever give your energy back to someone who mishandled it the first time? You're not responsible for teaching them how to appreciate what they already had. You did your part. You loved out loud. You showed up. You stayed soft even when the world told you to go hard. And for that, you're not weak. You're rare. In Stoic relationships, that kind of loyalty is sacred. But it can't be one-sided. You are no longer in the business of proving your worth to people who only show interest when you disappear. You're done teaching them lessons through your pain. From now on, you teach through your absence. Through your silence. Through your refusal to be baited into old cycles that did nothing but drain you. Because you don't need to be heard by someone who never listened. They thought your kindness was infinite. They thought your love was unconditional. And perhaps it was, for a time. But even the most generous hearts have limits. And yours? It reached capacity the moment they stopped showing up. Now they get to live with the consequences. Not because you're cruel, but because you're clear. And that clarity is deafening. There's nothing to go back to. That version of you no longer texts. That version of you no longer explains. That version of you no longer reaches out just to remind someone you exist. Because now you understand, if they truly valued you, you wouldn't be in this position. If they cared, they would have shown it. And if they respected you, they wouldn't have gambled with your loyalty. So if this is resonating with you, here's what I want you to do. Take a deep breath, feel that clarity, and remind yourself, they didn't lose you because you stopped texting. They lost you because they stopped caring. That's the truth. Let it sit. Let it free you. And if this part of the video hit home, I want you to like this video and comment, number 1, right now if you're starting to feel that power return. Subscribe to the channel if you're ready to build stoic relationships based on mutual respect, not ego. More truths are coming, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's next. 3. Your words were oxygen, now they're suffocating without them. You may not realize this yet, but every message you sent was more than just words. It was breath, soul, life force. The kind of emotional oxygen that someone drowning in their own ego can't admit they depended on. But they did. Every, "How are you?" Every, "Just checking in." Every thoughtful follow-up when they disappeared for days. Those weren't just texts. They were a pattern. A flow of care they came to expect, to lean on, to feed from, without ever asking where it came from, or what it cost you. Now that the messages have stopped, that air supply is gone. And for the first time, they're left with the silence they once used as power. Except now, it doesn't feel powerful. It feels suffocating. And the truth is, they don't know how to breathe on their own. They've been living off your emotional generosity for so long, they forgot what it means to contribute to a connection. And now that you've pulled the plug, there's nothing left but the echo of everything they didn't appreciate. Have you ever seen someone panic quietly? Smiling on the outside, scrolling endlessly, pretending they're fine while internally unraveling? That's what they're doing now. They won't admit it. They'll post louder, flirt harder, act unbothered. But behind all of that noise is a deafening silence they can't escape, the silence you left behind. That silence is filled with reminders of how effortless you made connection feel. How your words always arrived before theirs. How your energy made them feel seen, even when they never looked back. But now, the inbox is empty. And their pride won't let them text first. So they wait. They wait and watch. And as the hours stretch into days, the days into weeks, something begins to happen. Not loudly. Not in fireworks or dramatic breakdowns. But in slow, creeping discomfort. The kind of psychological withdrawal that only comes when someone loses something they never thought would leave. They're checking their phone more than ever. Not out of curiosity, but desperation. They miss the ping. The dopamine hit. The rush of knowing someone cared enough to reach out. But more than anything, they miss the control. Because that's what your text gave them, a sense of power. And now that the faucet is off, they realize how thirsty they really were. Think back. How many times did you send a heartfelt message and get a lazy, one-word reply? How many jokes did you make just to make them smile, and they didn't even acknowledge it? How many check-ins went unanswered? You weren't just talking. You were giving CPR. You were keeping the connection alive with your breath while they stood there with crossed arms, refusing to resuscitate anything. This is what Stoicism teaches us. There is a time to give, and a time to let go. A time to pour in, and a time to preserve. And you've poured long enough. Your well is not infinite. And it's not your job to keep others afloat when they won't even tread water. Your words gave them life. Now your silence gives them reality. And reality is much harder to swallow than attention. Have they changed? Are they learning? It's tempting to ask. But here's the better question, does it even matter? You're not responsible for their growth. You're responsible for your boundaries. And your silence is not about monitoring their discomfort. It's about honoring your decision to stop explaining yourself to someone who never listened in the first place. Remember, they didn't just take your words for granted, they relied on them. Your morning texts. Your affirmations. Your reminders that they mattered. That's what they really miss. Not you. Not your soul. But the service you provided. The validation. The emotional support. The steady hand reaching into their chaos. And now that it's gone, they're feeling the emptiness of everything they refused to give back. Isn't it strange how quickly people notice your absence when they never acknowledged your presence? That's the paradox of emotional labor. When you give freely, people forget it was a choice. They think it's who you are. And when you stop, they accuse you of changing. But the truth is, you didn't change. You just stopped performing love for someone who refused to participate. And yes, they're hurting. But not in the way you hoped. They're not suddenly enlightened. They're just inconvenienced. They're feeling the void, not because they value you now, but because they can't stand not being the center of your attention. This is the root of so many imbalanced connections, the fear of losing power, not the fear of losing you. So what happens next? They'll test the waters. A story view here. A like there. A breadcrumb dropped in the form of a vague quote or a late-night reaction. Not because they want to reconnect, but because they want to see if the oxygen line is still open. But you're done playing paramedic to someone who called you dramatic every time you pointed out the bleeding. You didn't just stop texting. You stopped supplying. You stopped being the one who fixes everything. And now they're gasping, not because they need you, but because they never learn how to breathe without your effort. And that's not your responsibility to fix. Let's be brutally honest. If they truly cared, they would have asked how you were instead of wondering why you went silent. If they valued your messages, they wouldn't have made you feel like a burden for sending them. And if they respected you, they would have matched your energy before you ever had to go quiet. This is what Stoic relationships demand: balance, integrity, mutual effort. And when that doesn't exist, the only dignified move is withdrawal. Not as punishment, but as a reset. Your silence is the boundary they never thought you'd have. And now that you've built it, they're pacing behind it, unsure of how to reach what they once had easy access to. Maybe they're typing a message now. Maybe they're editing it, rewriting it, deleting it. But that's not your concern. Because you're no longer waiting. You're no longer hoping. You're no longer holding your breath to see if they remember you. You've already exhaled. This is the beautiful brutality of letting go. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It's quiet, steady, final. And in that silence, you're not empty, you're full. Full of clarity. Full of dignity. Full of peace. The same peace they now crave but cannot access. Because that peace was you. They'll search for someone else to text. To validate them. To remind them they matter. But it won't hit the same. Because the oxygen you gave wasn't generic. It was personal. Specific. Real. And what's real doesn't get replaced. It gets remembered. Quietly. Painfully. Endlessly. You didn't disappear to hurt them. You disappeared to save yourself. And that decision? That's what Stoicism looks like in practice. The discipline to remove yourself from what depletes you, even when you still care. The strength to offer silence instead of justification. The courage to heal rather than fix. So let them miss you. Let them scroll. Let them sit in the discomfort of what they lost. Because your job was never to carry someone who refused to walk. Your job was to speak with love. And when that love was met with silence, games, or manipulation, your final word became none at all. That's the new you. The version that doesn't chase. That doesn't perform. That doesn't try to convince someone to breathe with you. Because the right person? They won't need your oxygen. They'll bring their own. And together you'll both exhale peace. 4. They thought you'd break first, now they're the ones unraveling. They were so sure, weren't they? So confident you'd be the one to blink first. The one to text. The one to chase. That's how the cycle had always gone. You, the giver. You, the fixer. You, the one who forgave before the apology even arrived. They bet everything on your weakness, mistaking your love for dependence. But they were wrong. Because what they didn't see coming, what their pride never allowed them to imagine, was that you'd stop playing. That you'd stop explaining. That you'd stop trying. They were counting on your pain to keep you connected. On your heart to override your boundaries. That's how they held power, through silence, through games, through withdrawal. They thought ignoring you would make you smaller. But instead, it made you still. And in that stillness, you found something they never expected: clarity. A clarity so sharp it cut through every illusion you had about them, about the relationship, and about yourself. And now they're spiraling. Quietly, secretly, but undeniably. Because they didn't just lose someone who cared, they lost the one person who saw them. And that kind of loss doesn't announce itself with tears or breakdowns. It creeps in, slow and haunting. It lingers in the quiet moments, in the late nights, in the empty inbox. That's when your absence hits hardest. Not with sound, but with weight. It's ironic, really. They use silence as a weapon, assuming it would keep you chasing. But silence is a double-edged sword. And now that you've chosen it for yourself, it's cutting them. They never imagined you'd grow comfortable in the quiet. That you'd learn to love the sound of your own peace more than the chaos of waiting for them. They assumed you'd fall apart without their crumbs. But instead you rose. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. The tug of war ended the moment you let go of the rope. They weren't ready for that. They never planned for a version of you that wouldn't reach back. That wouldn't explain the silence. That wouldn't make one last attempt to save what was never mutual. And now, that version of you, the quiet, steady, centered one, is the most powerful version they've ever encountered. Let's not lie, they feel it. They feel it in every space where your name used to appear. They feel it when they open their phone and realize there's nothing new. Nothing from you. And worse, no way back. Not to the way things were. Not to the you that would have forgiven again. That door isn't just closed, it's locked. And that lock? It's made of all the times you gave more than you got. This unraveling doesn't look like chaos. It looks like restlessness. It looks like rereading old messages they'd barely acknowledged at the time. It looks like scrolling through your old photos, trying to figure out when it all changed. It looks like haunting their own memories, searching for the moment you stopped being predictable. That's what rattles them the most. You're not angry. You're unavailable. And that shift? It breaks the illusion they built. The illusion that you needed them more than they needed you. That illusion only stood because you kept playing your part. You kept texting. You kept showing up. You kept softening your boundaries to make space for their inconsistency. But when you finally stepped back, when you stopped performing, their fantasy collapsed. And now, they're left holding the pieces. Do they miss you? Maybe. But not the way you deserve to be missed. They miss the access, not the connection. They miss the way you made them feel powerful. The way you gave without asking. The way you made love look effortless. But do they miss seeing you? Hearing you? Honoring you? That kind of missing only comes with growth. And growth requires humility, something they never practiced when you were around. There's something humbling about being ignored by someone you once overlooked. They thought you'd break from their silence. Instead, they're breaking from yours. And they won't say it. They'll act like everything's fine. But fine people don't stalk your stories. Fine people don't send late-night texts and delete them. Fine people don't try to get your attention without actually apologizing. They were never prepared for this outcome because they never thought you'd choose yourself. But that's what Stoicism is. It's the steady decision to walk away without drama, to release without resentment, to detach without malice. And when you do that, when you reclaim your energy and choose peace over proximity, the entire dynamic changes. Suddenly, they're no longer the center. They're just another lesson. How many times did you break first just to keep the connection alive? How many nights did you sit there, typing and deleting, trying to find the perfect words to make them understand? And what did that ever bring you? A cycle. A loop. A performance. But now, the performance is over. The curtain has dropped. And you're not in the audience anymore, you've left the theater. This unraveling, this spiral, they brought it on themselves. They weaponized distance, not realizing it was a boomerang. And now, that distance has returned with force. Because Stoic relationships are built on shared respect, not emotional leverage. You gave love. They played games. And now they're realizing the game ended the moment you stopped playing. There's no scoreboard here. No dramatic finish. Just the quiet realization that they underestimated you. That's the real sting. They thought you'd always be there. But permanence isn't a gift, it's a privilege. And they lost it. Not because you became someone else, but because you returned to yourself. They thought they had time. Time to change. Time to come around. Time to be ready. But time doesn't wait for people who delay love. And while they were figuring themselves out, you figured out that you deserve more. More clarity. More peace. More reciprocity. And now that they want back what they once dismissed, it's too late. Let them sit with that. Let them feel the absence. Not to punish them, but to remind you of how far you've come. You're not the one who breaks first anymore. You're the one who builds boundaries. Who chooses dignity. Who stands firm in silence, and knows that not every ending needs closure, just courage. If this message is hitting deep for you, if you're nodding your head thinking, "Yes, this is me," then I want you to like this video and comment number 1 right now. Let's make this a community of clarity, of calm power, of stoicism in action. And if you're not subscribed yet, do it now. This is just the beginning, and there's so much more I need to share with you. Stay grounded. Stay powerful. Stay silent. And let them be the ones who break. 5. Your absence is their mirror. They're finally facing themselves. There's a truth they never wanted to confront, and now they have no choice. Because your absence didn't just leave a space in their inbox or a gap in their routine. It left a mirror. A reflection they can't look away from. One that shows them exactly who they've been, stripped of excuses and distractions. And what they see? It's not pretty. Because when you were there, when your love was consistent, when your energy softened every hard edge of their personality, they didn't have to face it. They didn't have to see themselves. You were the buffer. The emotional bomb. The filter. But now there's only silence. And it's not just quiet, it's revelatory. They can scroll all they want. Stalk all they like. Replay every moment in their mind. But what they'll keep encountering over and over again is the version of themselves that they tried to hide, the one they hoped your love would cover. And it did for a while. But no love, no matter how unconditional, can keep a person safe from their own reflection forever. That's the cost of losing someone real. The light leaves, and you're left with nothing but the shadows. People often think the worst part of being left is loneliness. But what really breaks them is recognition. Realizing that the person who loved them the most walked away, not because they stopped loving, but because they started seeing the truth. The truth that the relationship wasn't mutual. That the connection was lopsided. That one person was doing the work of two. And now, they're finally seeing that too, but through the lens of absence. It's easy to perform peace. It's easy to pretend you're unbothered when someone is still reaching out. But when they don't, when the messages stop, that's when the act crumbles. That's when the fake peace begins to itch like a costume worn too long. They're wearing it now, smiling in public, laughing louder, posting more, but inside, there's dissonance. Because the silence you left behind isn't just absence, it's accountability. That's the secret power of stoicism. It doesn't scream. It doesn't demand apologies or explanations. It simply withdraws. And in that withdrawal, the lesson is carved. Slowly. Deeply. Permanently. You don't need to send another word to remind them of what they lost. Your absence has become their echo chamber. Every ignored message. Every dry reply. Every silent treatment they used like a weapon, now boomeranging back, louder than ever. They won't tell their friends what they're feeling. They won't post about the nights they spend staring at the ceiling, replaying your voice. But make no mistake, they're in it. Drowning in the silence. Suffocating under the weight of their own choices. And it's not your presence that haunts them, it's the version of themselves they see now that you're no longer there to distract them from it. You see, when someone keeps receiving your love no matter how little they give, they don't have to evolve. Your presence enables their stagnation. Your forgiveness lets them delay growth. Your consistency becomes a crutch for their inconsistency. But your absence? It removes the safety net. And when the safety net is gone, the fall begins. This isn't cruelty. This isn't a game. This is nature. When you pull your energy back, the equation changes. And they are now left with only what they contributed. Which, if they're honest, wasn't much. That's what terrifies them. Not that you're gone, but that they never gave enough for you to stay. And the mirror doesn't lie. Can you imagine what it feels like to realize that the person who loved you most now finds peace without you? That their joy is no longer tethered to your presence? That the control you once had is gone, not because they fought you, but because they simply stopped needing you. That's the ache they're sitting in now. The one they can't name. The one they'll deny, even as it consumes them. Your absence is not punishment, it's perspective. It gives them the one thing your presence could never provide, a true look at themselves. No mask. No filter. Just truth. And while that truth may have taken you years to see clearly, they're only just beginning to face it. And they're not ready. Not by a long shot. Because when you were there, they could always point the finger. You're too emotional. You're overthinking. You want too much. But now that you're silent, who's left to blame? Who's left to silence? There's no one to talk over. No one to dismiss. Just them. Alone with every choice they made. Every word they said. Every reply they never sent. And the quiet? It's louder than any argument. You ever wonder why people spiral harder after you go silent than they did during the relationship? It's not about the loss. It's about what that loss reflects. That they had everything they needed to be loved, to grow, to show up, and they didn't. And now, the person who gave them those chances is gone. That's not just sad. That's devastating. And you didn't have to lift a finger to cause it. That's what Stoic relationships embody. Not just strength, but the restraint to let the universe handle the justice. You didn't cut them out. You cut them off from the version of you that tolerated disrespect. You didn't exile them. You evolved away from them. And now, they're looking around for the person who used to bend, to explain, to beg, and you're not there. There's something deeply sobering about seeing who you've been through someone else's exit. They'll start to realize the patterns, the habits, the emotional laziness. And maybe they'll change. Maybe they won't. But either way, it's no longer your responsibility. Because you've done your time. You've given your all. And now you've stepped back. And that space you've created? It's sacred. You're no longer available to be someone's distraction from themselves. You're no longer the mirror they get to smash every time they don't like what they see. You've put that mirror down, and now they're face to face with the parts they always avoided. And whether they evolve or not, you're not watching. Because your peace isn't a performance, it's protection. Let them unravel. Let them reflect. Let them confront the self they kept hidden while you carried the emotional weight. You are not their teacher anymore. You are not their therapist. You are not their mirror. You are your own person. Whole. Grounded. Sovereign. And that's what they're starting to understand, that your absence wasn't just you walking away. It was you returning to yourself. And the reflection you see now? It's not fractured. It's focused. You're no longer trying to change someone else's vision of you. You've finally embraced your own. This is what freedom looks like. It doesn't always feel good at first. It's lonely. It's quiet. But in that quiet, you find your voice again. Your value. Your vision. And when someone has spent months, or years, relying on you to shield them from themselves, your clarity becomes the storm they can't survive. So breathe. You didn't lose anything by walking away. You gained everything. You gained the ability to see yourself clearly. To stand in silence and not flinch. To love yourself enough not to return to a place where you were only seen through the lens of what you could offer. That mirror they now face? It's not your burden. It's their becoming. And you? You've already moved beyond the frame. Let them catch up, if they ever do. But you're not waiting. You're living. 6. This isn't about them anymore. It's about you reclaiming your peace. There comes a moment in every person's healing journey when the focus shifts, completely, irrevocably, from the other person to themselves. That moment doesn't come with fireworks. It comes quietly. Usually after nights of overthinking, of scrolling through old messages, of wondering what went wrong. And then one day, you wake up and you're not wondering anymore. You're not checking your phone. You're not looking for their name in the notifications. You're just breathing. Not perfectly, not painlessly, but freely. And that breath? That's yours. Finally. Unshared. Uninterrupted. Unapologetic. Because this was never just about the text. It was about what those texts represented: hope, connection, worthiness. For too long, you tied your sense of value to their replies. You waited. You begged with silence. You played strong in public while crumbling behind the screen. And all the while, you weren't just reaching out to them. You were trying to reach the part of you that believed love meant proving something. That your presence needed to be earned through persistence. But it doesn't. And it never did. You thought silence would break you. That the lack of closure would leave you hollow. But now you see it for what it is: protection. That space you feared? It's your sanctuary now. A boundary forged not out of spite, but out of survival. And it's in that space that you found something they never gave you: permission to stop performing. You don't need anyone's permission to heal. You don't need their apology to forgive yourself for staying too long. What you needed all along wasn't a response, it was release. Release from the illusion that you had to keep giving, keep fixing, keep hoping, in order to be loved. Real love doesn't feel like a job application. It doesn't come with terms and conditions. It simply shows up and stays. They didn't leave you because you weren't enough. They left because they knew you'd stay anyway. And now that you're gone, truly gone, not just physically but emotionally, energetically, spiritually, they feel it. But this isn't their story anymore. It's yours. And your story is not about who left, who ghosted, who never replied. It's about who you're becoming now that the noise is gone. This is what Stoicism teaches us: not to numb ourselves from pain, but to transform through it. To let suffering carve wisdom, not walls. To let disappointment become the doorway back to self. You're not bitter. You're becoming. You're not heartless. You're healing. And that distinction? That's everything. For so long, you were someone's mirror. You reflected their potential, their worth, their image. But you never got the same reflection in return. Now you're holding your own mirror. And what you see? It's not broken. It's not fragile. It's clear. A version of you that doesn't need to text first. A version that doesn't need to be seen by someone else in order to feel real. You've started to learn what peace sounds like. It's not the absence of longing, it's the presence of alignment. It's waking up without the ache to reach out. It's going a day without wondering if they miss you. It's recognizing that the fantasy you created was never based on reality, but on your desire to be loved the way you love. And now that you've stopped texting, you've stopped betraying yourself for a connection that only lived in one direction. Let that sink in. You didn't lose a partner. You lost a pattern. You didn't lose a soulmate. You lost a cycle of emotional labor that was never reciprocated. And now that you've broken the cycle, you're breathing again. Fully. Deeply. Finally. And they're still stuck in the loop of ego and avoidance. But you're not waiting for them to catch up. You've evolved beyond their reach. Not because you blocked them, but because you unblocked yourself. You let go of the version of you that needed their recognition to feel worthy. That version was tired. That version was afraid. That version believed love meant proving, pleading, performing. But now you know better. Love doesn't chase. Love chooses. This isn't about closure. Closure is what you give yourself when you stop arguing with what someone already showed you. They showed you who they were when they ignored your vulnerability. They showed you what they valued when they chose ego over empathy. So now you get to choose. Not them. You. And what you're choosing now is peace. Not the kind you perform for social media. The kind that comes when you sit with your own silence and don't feel the need to fill it. The kind that stretches wide across your day and gently says, "You don't owe anyone an explanation for healing." Do they still think about you? Probably. But that's not your burden. That's not your closure. What matters now is not if they remember you. It's if you remember yourself. The self that existed before you tried to shrink for love. The self that doesn't need to chase anyone to feel seen. When someone is emotionally immature, your consistency looks like permission. Your kindness looks like weakness. Your patience looks like a pass for them to disrespect you. But now, your absence teaches what your words never could. That your love was a privilege, not a guarantee. That your loyalty wasn't owed, it was chosen. And that choice? It no longer belongs to them. Let them wonder. Let them scroll. Let them pretend they're fine while drowning in the silence they once used against you. Because you're no longer participating in their storyline. You're writing your own. And this chapter? It's one of wholeness. Of grounded, stoic clarity. Of choosing not to text, not as punishment, but as a declaration of freedom. You might still get the itch. That moment at night when you want to reach out. When the memory creeps in. But ask yourself this. What would you actually be saying? What part of you would be speaking? The healed you? Or the old version, still hoping to get back what never existed? You already know the answer. And when that doubt creeps in, remember, peace never makes you question your worth. Love never makes you chase it down. Presence never has to be begged for. So when silence feels hard, remind yourself, it's not emptiness. It's space. Space for better. Space for real. Space for you. You're not missing out on anything by letting go. What you're leaving behind wasn't love. It was the idea of love that you tried to sustain all on your own. But love requires two hands. Two hearts. Two souls. Not one reaching endlessly into a void. And here's the most powerful part. You're not just healing yourself. You're creating a new standard. One that says, I don't text first if I'm not being met halfway. One that says, my peace matters more than their comfort. One that says, I choose me, even when it's hard. If you made it here, and this part of the video hits that deeper place in you, the one that finally feels ready to stop performing love, then like this video, comment, number 1, right now to claim your voice, and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Because we're just getting started. This isn't the end of a connection. It's the beginning of your freedom. And freedom looks good on you. So here we are. After everything. After the silence, after the pain, after the slow realization that the version of you who used to text, wait, hope, and overextend, no longer exists. You've walked through the fire of emotional restraint and come out not unburned, but refined. And if you're still here, if you're still breathing through the quiet, still learning to feel steady in your own space, then you've done something most people never have the courage to do. You've chosen yourself. And not in a loud, defiant way, but in the quiet, grounded way that Stoicism teaches us, through action, not reaction. Through peace, not performance. You've begun to understand that silence isn't just absence, it's presence. The kind of presence that says, I don't need to chase what doesn't choose me. And in this presence, in this stillness, you've started to rebuild a self that isn't hinged on whether or not someone responds to your last message. You've moved from survival mode to sovereign space. You're no longer defined by the conversation you hoped would happen. You are defined now by the conversation you are willing to walk away from. This shift, this transition, didn't happen overnight. It was built slowly. Through every ignored message. Through every forced smile. Through every question you asked yourself. Why am I the only one trying? Why do I feel so invisible? And the answer wasn't in them. It was in you. You were always the answer. But you had to go silent to hear yourself again. That's what makes silence so powerful. It tunes out the world long enough for you to listen inward. They may never understand what they lost. That's part of the journey too. Accepting that your worth doesn't need validation from the person who failed to see it. Let that truth settle deep. You were always whole. Even when they treated you like a half measure. Even when they played games with your sincerity. Even when they used silence as punishment. You were always someone's peace. Even when they were your chaos. It's not easy to walk away from potential. To let go of the dream you built in your mind. But potential is not partnership. A connection isn't real just because you imagine what it could be. It's real when it's mutual, when it's respectful, when it meets you where you are without asking you to shrink. And now, in this new chapter, your silence has become that meeting point, not between you and them, but between you and your truth. You may still feel moments of ache. Memory doesn't vanish. Some part of you will always remember the softness, the laughs, the almost. But now you know that remembering something doesn't mean returning to it. Memory is not a summons. It's just a page in the story, not a destination. And you've turned the page. Your peace doesn't require validation. It's not something that comes after they text back, or after they apologize, or after they finally admit what they did. Your peace exists now. Right now. In this breath. In this decision not to chase, not to beg, not to hope they'll come around. Because if they were capable of seeing you, of truly meeting you, they would have already. And the person who sees you next? They won't need silence to realize what they have. You are not cold for going quiet. You are not heartless for not replying. You are disciplined. You are practicing the kind of restraint that comes from knowing your value. Stoic relationships are not forged through constant connection. They are forged through presence, through depth, through self-awareness. And in choosing not to text again, you are choosing to honor all three. This doesn't make you better than them. It makes you more in tune with yourself. And that's what growth is. It's not perfection. It's progress. It's the gentle, consistent decision to return to yourself every time you're tempted to run back to what broke you. And even if your fingers still itch to type one more message, you now know that silence is a stronger statement than any words could ever be. Sometimes, the lesson wasn't in what they did. It was in what you tolerated. In what you accepted in the name of love. In the ways you forgot yourself to remember them. But that's over now. Not because you hate them, but because you've chosen to love yourself more than the hope of being loved by them. And that choice? It's sacred. They may come back. They may reach out. But by the time they do, you'll already be somewhere else, not geographically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You'll be in a place where you no longer need their attention to feel grounded. Because now you have your own. And that kind of self-attention? That's unshakable. Let them miss you. Let them wonder. Let them scroll through your old messages, hoping to find the version of you that no longer exists. They won't find it. Because you don't live in that space anymore. You live here. In the now. In the presence. In the quiet confidence that comes from choosing not to prove your worth to someone who made you question it. The silence you've chosen is not passive. It's not avoidance. It's active. Intentional. Transformational. Every moment you don't reach out is a step deeper into your own strength. Every hour you don't text is a moment reclaimed from a cycle that once drained you. And the more time that passes, the more you'll realize you never needed their response. You needed your own. You needed your own approval. Your own care. Your own reassurance. And now you're learning to give that to yourself in doses that once only came from others. That's the power of Stoicism. It teaches you to become your own source. So that no one, no matter how magnetic, can take you away from yourself again. Your silence has not made you invisible. It has made you undeniable. They may not say it, but they feel it. In their gut. In the quiet moments. In the places where your energy used to live. They remember not just what you said, but how you made them feel. And now that you're not there to make them feel anymore, they're left to sit with what they never gave back. But you've moved forward. Not with noise. Not with revenge. But with clarity. With grace. With poise. You've risen in silence, and now you walk differently. You carry yourself not as someone who was abandoned, but as someone who awakened. And the people who meet you now, they meet a version of you that has walked through fire and no longer fears the heat. It's tempting to look back, to question, to imagine. But look at you. Look at how far you've come. Not just in time, but in truth. You no longer need to be seen by them to feel visible. You see yourself clearly. And that clarity is more fulfilling than any reply they could ever send. This is the freedom you never knew you needed. The kind that doesn't come from closure or final texts, but from self-possession. You don't need a conclusion when you've already chosen the truth. And the truth is this: you were always enough. You just forgot for a while. But your silence reminded you. And as you walk into this next chapter, let it be with a calm heart. Not with bitterness, but with boundaries. Not with hatred, but with high standards. Not with resentment, but with resolve. You've already won. Not because they lost, but because you stopped losing yourself trying to keep something alive that was never truly alive with you. So breathe. Stand tall. Stay still. You're not the one who texts anymore. You're the one who teaches, through silence, through self-respect, through presence. You're not available to perform anymore. You're too busy becoming. And that silence? It echoes with strength. Let it speak for you now. Let it carry you forward. And let it remind you, your worth was never measured by someone else's attention. It was always yours to recognize. You're finally free.